Okay, here we are at Anderson's Bookshop in Naperville, Illinois, and they're having a great event today, having a great author here today, Ernest Cline, who's got a great book today. Ernest, thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
It's the Bridge to Bat City, so let's hear all about it. What is Bridge to Bat City?
Bridge to Bat City is my first middle grade fiction novel for kids from around the age like 7 to 13, 14. But I think it is a book that will appeal to everyone. And it's an idea that I've had kicking around in my head. It's not what I normally write, kind of mainstream adult science fiction like Ready Player One. But this is an idea that I've had since before I wrote Ready Player One, since I first moved to Austin, Texas in 1996. And when I first moved to town, everybody asked me if I'd seen the bats yet. Have you gone to see the bats? And I had never heard about this, but Austin was and is home to the world's largest urban bat colony. It has like about 1.5 million Mexican free-tail bats, live under the Congress Avenue Bridge, which is now the Ann Richards Bridge, right in downtown, like a mile south of the state capitol. And when this first happened, I found out in 1982 they refurbished the bridge and they added these concrete box beams to the underside of the bridge with these narrow cracks so the concrete could expand and retract in the cold and the heat. And these narrow cracks are just over 1 inch wide, and that happened to be the perfect size for a Mexican free-tail bat to roost in. These little tiny bats about yay long, and they need a space about that wide to roost in so that their predators can't follow them inside. Like hawks and owls, so they can sleep in there. They can leave their babies, which are called pups, inside, and it ended up making this bridge right in the middle of downtown, into a perfect bat hotel. So pretty much overnight, over 1 million of these bats moved into the bridge, and it terrified the citizens of Austin. There was a lot of newspaper articles. The Austin American-Statesman, the local newspaper, had its offices right there next to the bridge, and so they ran a bunch of articles about, vampire bats have sinking teeth into the city, and made people feel like these were rabid bats that were going to attack people, and kind of the whole city was terrified, partly because everyone has preconceived fear or notions about bats, and a fear, right? You grow up putting bats up on the wall at Halloween, and every horror movie, if they want to scare you, they'll open a door or a cave, and a bunch of bats will fly out right at the camera, and it's meant to trigger like a terror reflex in people that maybe humans have partly, something inherent that makes you afraid of bats, or I wonder how much of it is preconceived, like you're kind of always taught to fear bats. So when you see one, you do. And when everybody saw these bats, 1 million bats streaming out from under the bridge in Austin, it terrified everyone, and they were going to get rid of them. There was a movement in the city council, I found out, to burn them out with blowtorches and flamethrowers, and then put up nets and screens over these cracks on the other side of the bridge so that the bats could never get back in, because they didn't want this giant colony of Mexican free-tail bats. I love that they are Mexican free-tail bats as well, so there's like another layer of prejudice for some people in Texas against everything Mexican, and then also the prejudice of bats. So there's all these reasons for people to be prejudiced against the bats and to want them gone, and a lot of people did want them gone. But through a crazy series of events, they managed to win over the city and then become the town mascots. Partly because it's Austin, I think. I'm not sure this would have happened in any other city, but Austin is a city that prides itself on being weird and being the Groover's paradise, and kind of a town that's welcoming to everyone and open to every whatever kind of weird artist or musician or person you are. Austin will embrace you and welcome you and make you one of its own. And that's what they ended up doing with the bats. The bats was like, for a city that prides itself on weirdness, well, what could be weirder than a bat colony in the middle of downtown of the state capitol? So, and then another factor was this guy named Merlin Tuttle, who is a famous bat conservationist that you can look up. And he saw all these news articles about the bats invading Austin, got picked up nationally. And when Merlin saw these stories, he was a bat conservationist living and working up in Wisconsin, and he saw these stories and saw it was a golden, unique opportunity that these bats had invaded a human habitat. He could show that bats and humans could coexist, and it could be beneficial for both species, and that people didn't need to be afraid of bats. So he picked up everything and moved down to Austin in right around as soon as he found out about the bats, and then set about educating everybody in Austin. He would catch them and take them to like city council meetings or to meet like Ann Richards, like when she was governor, and show people and lawmakers the bats up close and show them that they're harmless little creatures and that they don't attack humans. They don't have any more instances of rabies than dogs, much less, and that they're essential for maintaining the balance of nature. And they eat their own body weight in insects every night, so they're hugely beneficial to the ecosystem. So once I found this out, and once the people of Austin found this out, and Merlin educated everyone. They decided to let the bats stay, and then they did become the town mascots. And now, downtown Austin, we have 3 statues: Stevie Ray Vaughan, Willie Nelson, and a statue of a bat. It's called an installation called Nightwing, and it's a symbol of Austin's love of the bats and how it now calls the bats home. And I found, just about 6 or 7 years after these articles about the bats have invaded Austin, I found another set of articles where Austin had declared itself the bat capital of America and home, and was urging people to come to Austin to see the bats as a tourist attraction. And the bats ended up becoming one of Austin's biggest tourist attractions and part of its identity. Bat City is one of Austin's nicknames, in addition to the live music being the live music capital of the world. So when I found out this true story about an invasive species that moved into a human city and they wanted to eradicate it, but then they turned it around and became the town mascots and part of its identity. In the weird capital of America or the world, Austin, Texas, and it's also the live music capital of the world. So, music and musicians and all that plays a part in this story. And when I heard that story, I always thought, what a great story for a children's literature, for a story like the ones that I grew up loving, like James and the Giant Peach or Charlotte's Web or Fantastic Mr. Fox, stories where kids team up with anthropomorphic animals that have kind of human characteristics and they go on an adventure. I love stories like that so much. I love reading stories like that to my kids. And when I took my own kids to see the bats, when I became a father and took my own kids to see the bats, they had the same questions I had about where did the bats live before they were under the bridge, and what are their lives like and what are their families like. And so in talking with both my kids, and some of the answers to these questions, like where the bats lived before the bridge, nobody knows. So my kids and I kind of made up answers to these stories, and I crafted my own kind of family mythology about the bridge and a girl who loses her own home on her family farm, and they move to Austin together, and they all love music, so Austin is the perfect town for them. But then they have to win over. It seemed like the perfect story about a band of misfits and outsiders who go to a new place and are at first shunned, but then it turns out to be they find their place in the world. So that, in essence, is what I always thought someone would tell the story of the bridge and the bats in Austin, and that it wouldn't be me because I write science fiction and it's not for me, but. I think it was telling these stories again to my own kids during the pandemic, and I'm like, someone I should go ahead, and the truth is, this is actually a science fiction story too, even though it's a middle grade story and it's about a girl and a colony of bats. There is a science fiction element to it that I really love. So it's not completely outside my wheelhouse, but it is for younger readers, and it's a different narrative voice than I've done before. But I'm really proud of it, and this is the only idea I ever had for a middle grade fiction novel, and I always wanted to do this, and so now I'm excited to put it out into the world. I hope I had all this. I've been appearing at a lot of schools, so I had this all memorized. So that's Bridge to Bat City in a nutshell. But hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I like when you brought up the music capital of the world, and I believe music plays a part in the story. What type of music's involved in this? Because you're very good at incorporating that.
Yes, there's a whole soundtrack in the back of the book, and there's actually one song for each chapter, and the song will be a song that's mentioned or has some sort of thematic tie to the songs in the story. But there are a ton of Austin musicians and famous Austin and Texas musicians like ZZ Top and Fabulous Thunderbirds and Joe Ely and musicians from out of town. Austin is this weird, anomalous little, used to be a little college town in Texas, but because of South by Southwest and it being the live music capital of the world and kind of this crossroads. It's the hill country there. It's where the Southwest meets the Southeast right there in the Texas hill country. So, and every great musician from all around the world ends up coming to Austin, either to appear at South by Southwest or record on Austin City Limits. So you don't really have to go anywhere, and you just stay right there and just see all the best musicians from all over the world playing all the time. And it's the perfect, it's kind of a magical land of Oz if you love music. And so I love music, and my kids and I love music, and music is woven, music and musicians and Austin City Limits and Willie Nelson and Stevie Ray Vaughan, all that stuff is woven through the whole story. So it is a story about music. The Bats are melomaniacs. They're obsessed with music and musical tones. And the protagonist of my story, Opal B. Flats, she's from Lubbock. And she's obsessed with Buddy Holly, who is also from Lubbock, Texas, and is obsessed with music and musical tones and loves music. And so when they move to Austin, they're just in heaven because there's all the best music playing all the time, like everywhere you go.
Do you think it might become into a movie like Ready Player One?
It might. I always, that was in my initial thought. Like, this would be a great children's book, just like Fantastic Mr. Fox or James and the Giant Peach, and then it would also lend itself to being a great movie and a children's kind of a jukebox musical, that I and my kids love so much, like Happy Feet or Sing, or ones that kind of incorporate a lot of songs that everybody knows, but has, this would be is that kind of story, because the Bats do have a connection with the music and our music files and love music as well. So it's a story for people who love music and tall tales.
Do you have like a website or social media people can look at?
I believe, yes, the publisher. If you go to Little Brown Children's Books, their social media and their website, they've set up a website and everything for the book.
And they've got that book here at Anderson's Bookshop in Naperville, Illinois. Ernest Cline, we thank you so much for coming on down, and we enjoy reading your novels.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.